Welcome back to Wessex Watch. Today we're going back in time, before quartz timepieces threatened Swiss homogeny over all things wristwatch, back to when microelectronics were a new and very exciting thing, and back to the dawn of human spaceflight, but more on that later. Today I'd like to share with you the story of a timepiece developed and introduced by the Bulova Watch Company, the Bulova Accutron Spaceview. Our story begins in the 1950s, when Bulova was operating development facilities in both Switzerland and the USA. The Bulova Accutron's tuning fork movement was developed in this decade and was the first widespread commercial application of the transistor, certainly the first wearable transistor-based consumer product in history. The Accutron wasn't the first electronic watch utilizing a battery or power cell, which eliminates the need for a mainspring to power the watch. The U.S. Elgin Watch Company unveiled the battery-powered watch, the Elgin Grade 725, in 1952. That watch movement was never really perfected, and thus never sold widely. The Elgin watches used a battery, but they still used a balance wheel and an escapement mechanism for their driving train moving the hands, which are the weakest part of a watch movement and arguably the greatest source of trouble in a mechanical watch. In 1950, Max Herzl, a Swiss inventor, joined Bulova Switzerland to spearhead their electronic movement project. His work with the company began in Biel, current home to Rolex, Omega, and the Swatch Group. And Herzl believed that adding a transistor to a mechanical movement would help improve the watch's precision. He eventually replaced the balance with a tuning fork to further improve performance. The tuning fork was asymmetrical in shape and had a small metallic piece made of two parallel arms which used a microtransistor that created electronic impulses in order to activate the two coils. One of these coils had a measuring capability, which determined the amount and timing of the current pulse, which typically oscillated at 360 Hz. Compare that with a modern high-beat 4 Hz timekeeper. The copper wires of the coils are incredibly thin and measure almost 200 meters in length. Bulova came up with a battery that made the tuning fork vibrate. The vibrations of the tuning fork are invisible to the naked eye, but give off a distinct humming sound at 360 Hz. The mechanism was very small compared to a conventional watch mechanism at that time and was virtually invisible. The accuracy achieved resulted in plus or minus 2 seconds a day, which is pretty unheard of for that era. The revolutionary Accutron watch was officially introduced on October 10, 1960 by Bulova's chairman, General Omar Bradley. Bradley was a general of the United States Army during and after World War II. In retirement, Bradley held a number of positions in commercial life, including chairman of the board of the Bulova Watch Company. There's much more to the story of General Bradley and his support of veterans, including watchmaking schools for returning disabled veterans, than I can possibly fit in this video. The Accutron Spaceview, with its 14-karat gold case, the 214 tuning fork movement without a dial, a crystal printed with hour markers and white luminous hands, was originally created as a marketing tool for merchants eager to offer an eye-catcher in their displays. Unlike standard models, the Spaceview came with an open dial that showed the tuning fork and the other technical parts. The initial idea was to showcase the watch in the window to attract attention to passing onlookers. However, the watch was so popular that merchants were selling the display models to avoid losing valuable business. This window model was so much in demand that Bulova quickly decided to produce it for retail. Their advertising campaign at the time praised 99.9977% precision, along with the slogan, "The watch that hums." The watch did not feature a crown, which was a deliberate power move, showing Accutron had such accurate precision it didn't need to be set. The microscopic internal index mechanism meant the tuning fork watches were characterized by that beautiful, constant sweeping second hand. America's nascent space industry took notice of the new technology due to its accuracy. Astronauts wore Accutron watches, and an Accutron with a 24-hour dial was used in the capsules of the Gemini program. The Apollo spacecraft were also equipped with Accutron timekeepers. In all, Bulova Accutron clocks were used on the dashboard of 46 space missions. In May 1963, astronaut Gordon Cooper was the 7th Mercury program astronaut to be launched on Faith 7, the final of the Mercury missions. He was to orbit the Earth 22 times before re-entering. Cooper's flight went well for most of the mission. Serious technical problems began on the 19th orbit when the spacecraft's electrical systems began to fail. The temperature inside the capsule began climbing, as did carbon dioxide levels. On the 20th orbit, Cooper lost all readings indicating the attitude or orientation of the spacecraft. And on the 21st orbit, the automatic stabilization and control system had failed completely. Because the radio was wired directly into the batteries, voice communication was possible, but telemetry was lost. Mission Control could no longer monitor or advise Cooper about his spacecraft. The remainder of the mission, including retrofire and reentry, would have to be completed manually, using controllers that were directly connected to the thrusters. Even a small error in orientation of the spacecraft or timing of the retrofire could mean missing the splashdown target by hundreds of miles. Because he had no attitude readings, Cooper was forced to use his view of the Earth and stars through the capsule window to orient the spacecraft correctly for re-entry. The clock inside Phase 7 was dead, so Cooper relied on a radioed countdown from Capcom John Glenn and used his Bulova Accutron astronaut GMT wristwatch to time the manual firing of the retro-rockets. Cooper performed these tasks perfectly and splashed down in the Pacific Ocean just 4.4 miles and within view of the recovery vessel, the USS Kearsarge. It was the most accurate splashdown of the entire Mercury program. Approximately 40 minutes later, Cooper and Phase 7 were back on board the carrier. Talk about the right stuff. In 1965, the caliber 218 was introduced and was thinner than the 214. The new version was equipped with a more traditional style crown at the 4 o'clock position, or 2 crowns, one at the 2 and one at the 4. The 218 was released in a range of complications not seen in the 214, including calendar functions and a jump hour secondary time zone variant. While the 218 was a reliable, widely adopted caliber, it never offered a true Spaceview option, and never achieved the lasting popularity of the 214. Eventually, quartz technology and its consistent accuracy, along with decreased cost, made the tuning fork technology obsolete. Accutron development shifted to cheaper and smaller movements. By 1976, Bulova was selling budget-priced Accutron watches with quartz movements for as low as $75. In 1977, the tuning fork Accutron production was stopped altogether after more than 5 million pieces were sold. A unique feature I mentioned earlier was the lack of a traditional crown on the first Accutrons, including the Spaceview. To set the time, you accessed a pull ring on the rear of the watch, pulled up the setting stem, and twisted until the time was correct. There are no hacking features on this watch, but you can get the time closed by judicious closure of the battery hatch while watching a reference time. There's a comforting charm having a humming presence on the wrist, but the battery will only get you a few months of runtime before needing replacement, a distinct disadvantage to this otherwise fun timepiece. As George Daniels once said, a battery-powered watch has the dedicated ambition to commit suicide as soon as possible. Touché. I hope you've enjoyed the story of this unique artifact of horological history. Until next time, take care.